As I was saying, for many Victorians, the state's debt position isn't something they're thinking about on a daily basis, but it is certainly something they are feeling on a daily basis. There is an ever-growing cost of living crisis, inflation still not under control, and Victorians are having more of their own earnings taken by this government than anywhere else in the entire country, despite some previous claims of the Premier. But this out-of-control debt isn't just numbers on a piece of paper. It's $16 million a day down the gurgler just to pay off interest. And as we have learnt this week, the state is now approaching $200 billion, money the government has borrowed in the name of every Victorian, and including our children. $16 million would make an incredible difference to so many communities across my electorate, starved of funding from this government for too long. I would like to congratulate my community for their passionate advocacy in securing funding for a couple of projects after we made a commitment to funding them in the lead up to the election. The people of Benalla have made their voices heard in securing funding for a new Benalla Indoor Recreation Centre. The current venue was not only flooded in October, but it is not even close to fit for purpose for the incredible number of sporting groups and athletes who use the facilities every week. Thanks to a petition tabled in Parliament bearing more than 400 signatures and the support of user groups, the community will receive a new stadium to ensure everyone, young and old, can enjoy staying fit and active close to home. The invaluable work of Tomorrow Today will also continue with more funding provided to ensure the Education Benalla program can be delivered and their transformative work addressing intergenerational disadvantage and complex social and economic factors continues. The Foundation has clearly demonstrated a strong return of investment and has been rewarded with a continuation of funding that will make a continued difference for youth and families across our entire region. While Tomorrow Today receive funding for it this financial year, it is imperative the Foundation receives funding that is recurring to maintain this exceptional program. Our emergency service workers in Heathcote will also receive funding for a new co-located CFA and SES site. This new site needs to be located away from flood zones, with the SES having to constantly negotiate the challenges of turning out in flash flooding events while their own facilities were threatened. Likewise, in Kilmore, the SES has been hampered by their existing facilities due to the significant growth along the Hume, seeing their call-outs exponentially increase despite having to turn away new members due to their capacity constraints. New funding to build an upgraded shed on the existing site owned by the SES will alleviate some of this pressure and support their amazing work in the community and south all the way to Beveridge. All this funding came off the back of commitments from the Nationals. While this government has been dragged to the table on some local projects, there is still a desperate need for funding across the region. While the suburban rail loop, the Great Lemon that is not supported by a business case, nor appropriate for the current economic circumstances, rolls on, there is growing concern around the future of the Kilmore bypass. No business case has been completed, the land acquisition process has blown out over the years, and funding for this is set to expire with its completion by the end of the new financial year. Several questions I have raised about this to the Minister remain months overdue and unanswered, and we do not seem to be getting any closer to a resolution. Next year's budget needs to see more money on the books for the actual construction of this vital piece of infrastructure that will transform Kilmore and greatly enhance the livability of the town. While the government is happy to throw tens of billions of dollars down the drain because of their inability to manage major infrastructure, perhaps they should get back to basics and invest in regional bypasses that will have a significant benefit to their communities, ones like ours in Kilmore and other places like Shepparton. While on the topic of roads, let's take a look at this government's senseless cuts to road asset management. It has cut funding to roads when they first got into government, did a little bit of backtracking a few years ago, and now, in the wake of extensive damage to the state's network after last year's floods, has cut a further 25% of the budget. We have a backlog of billions in terms of road maintenance. Now we have seen even more cuts to the roads resurfacing budget, all the while our regional roads crumble and our devastating road toll continues to rise. The government is very good at claiming black is white and say they've boosted road funding over the decade, but it is categorically not true. The resilience of the road network is something that has a disproportionate impact on regional Victorians and our economy. Two of the favourite whipping boys of the Premier. In the health sector, we continue to see failure after failure. It could be the management of the 000 system, failures which have led to Victorians losing their lives under this government. Or it could be the tens of thousands of Victorians languishing on elective surgery wait lists. The Premier and Health Minister blame COVID for all the issues in the health system, but at the risk of repeating myself, Victorians face the longest lockdowns in the world while also having the worst health outcome during the pandemic. The common denominator between the failures in the health system, the mismanagement of the pandemic and record lockdowns is an incompetent government and nothing else. Our local hospitals are crying out for investment. And while I love fishing as much as the next person, you can ask my husband how patient I am waiting while he catches a fish. Handing out free fishing rods to children rather than fixing our broken health system is a kick in the guts to our local health services. Our community health providers are facing cuts. Most importantly, people in my electorate can't get the care they need close to home or even at all because of the failure to invest in life-saving services. Just this week, more news has come out about a tax on sick people and more pressure being put on our GPs and emergency departments. This 4.85% payroll tax is estimated to cost patients an extra $20 per appointment. And despite the spin we just heard, Victorians can see this is a health tax. Most GPs in regional towns like Benalla are already completely at capacity, having to turn away patients or place them on a 6-month wait list. 6 months. Why are we making life more difficult for the patient, the GP and our emergency departments all in one move? My electorate is experiencing population growth at extreme levels. We desperately need investment in local services like education. While Broadford Primary will be receiving an upgrade, we have Broadford Secondary College bursting at the seams. The Education Minister has no idea what is going on. She started by saying there was no enrolment pressure, to saying growth will be monitored, to now saying there is an enrolment plan in place. All the while, our children are being turned away from the school. Despite all of this, there's no investment in the budget for Broadford Secondary College. Compounding this is the rapid growth of Kilmore, one of the biggest towns in the state which does not even have a public secondary school. Families from this part of my electorate are travelling to communities their children are unfamiliar with, so they can get an education or feeling forced to pay private school fees just to keep their children in town. These are issues that will only worsen with projections for the Mitchell Shire showing exponential growth. While many projects in my electorate missed out on funding, others have had their existing funding gutted. Our visiting teacher program was set for massive job losses before a last-minute backflip by this government, thanks to outstanding community advocacy and pressure from the Nationals. To me, this was a heartless and distressing decision with no thought or care for our most vulnerable children. And this is just one area of education that has been massively slashed under this government. We already know several hundred other jobs are in the firing line. Our one-person police stations are also under threat, something that will be a huge detriment to our smaller regional towns, something the Premier is clearly unaware of. There are already 4 on the chopping block just in my electorate of Euroa. These are just some of the examples of the government failing to understand the needs of my electorate and the entire regional Victoria. Life continues to get harder under Labor, with rising work cover premiums now looming as a serious threat to Victoria's horse racing industry too. The horse industry's rate for work cover contribution has surged by an astounding 65% in the past year, with absolutely no warning, and after stud service fees were already set for the season. In 2021-22 financial year, the rate was 5.859%. In 22 to 23, it was 5.75%. And this year, it has jumped dramatically to 9.487%. It is simply unacceptable that local breeders are being put on financial risk due to this government's mishandling of the work cover system. Having spoken with several thoroughbred stud breeders, farmers and equine service providers, the rising cost of work cover premiums is suffocating the growth of the industry. The fact nearly 10% of farm pay is allocated towards work cover is absolutely ridiculous. Many of these businesses I spoke to have yet to even file a work cover claim, and these breeders are not facing the same risks as jockeys and track riders. It is completely unfair they are saddled with the same premium rates due to another example of this government's financial mismanagement. Training fees are increasing to cover costs, raising fears horse owners will be priced out of the sport and driven interstate unless they receive more support from this state government. Leading trainers have announced significant hikes in fees to cover WorkCover premiums, including daily surcharges, which is a painful hit to owners who are the lifeblood of racing. Coupled with inflation, the overall costs for owners and trainers are soaring as Victoria buckles under financial pressure. The current broken WorkCover system means less jobs, increased prices, and is adding to the cost of living crisis we're in the middle of. It has already been such a struggle for these businesses to find staff, and now they're weighing up if it's worth keeping them at all. This is an industry that contributes almost $5 billion a year to the economy and helps sustain 35,000 jobs across Victoria. We need to foster that, not make things harder for industry participants. I implore the Minister for Racing and the Minister for Finance to work together to fix this absolute mess before our horse industry moves to New South Wales. Day after day, I bring matters and the concerns of my constituents before ministers. Sometimes problems are acknowledged, but very rarely are solutions offered or funding put on the table. Regional Victorians are fed up. They are tired of a Premier who loves to gaslight his constituents, is happy to shamelessly tell Victorians black is white, and eager to erode democratic institutions, and has created a massive divide between those living in our regions and Melbourne. We deserve so much better than the leadership this state is faced with, and those on the other side who continually turn a blind eye to the poor governance that plagues this state. This government has never been about looking after regional Victorians. But if they're determined to spread this message, it's time to put your money where your mouth is, leave the comfort of the city and the suburbs, and speak to regional Victorians in the flesh. After what they've been through under this government, it is the very least you can do. On every metric, we are going backwards under this government, and Victorians simply cannot afford to keep paying for Labor's incompetence.